We're live.
We're live. Episode 8.
A Q1 recap. Somehow we are already at the end of March in a year that just started. I
I
don't know
don't
what happened.
understand. How can we be already at the end of a quarter? Oh my gosh.
I know. And I'm excited to dive into what we've read. This is by far my best reading year. I've had other years where I start really strong and then kind of fizzled out, but it definitely feels like this is my best reading year. And I think it will be because of projects like this podcast.
I was just going to say, it feels like it would have to be because of the podcast, because it's like, oh, how many can I read? Or I want to talk about this one on this show, or I have this challenge to do. We're not going to talk about challenges yet, but we have this challenge to do. It does definitely help feed into reading more. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some other stuff looking ahead at April. We're going to talk about something really exciting coming up, a read-a-thon for April we talked about in the last episode. So we're going to detail that and look at some books coming out in your Q2. So let's go ahead and dive in
Let's go. I'm really excited for this one, but I think I say that every time. But no, I'm like really, really excited for this one.
because we get better every time. It's more fun every time.
It's so much fun. I just love this.
We're going to look at Q1 as a whole and just kind of give some overviews, some highlights, and some maybe lowlights about our reading. So I'm going to kick it off. I read a total, now granted projected, right now I'm sitting at 39, but I hope to finish 4 books in the next few days. So 43 books this quarter. I know what you're saying. I can see it on your face. Nobody else can see you but me. But how did you do?
I got 15.
I think that's great.
That's more than I actually thought I was going to do. And considering that I started January with like 2 books, I had a really good February and March on reading. It just took off and soared. So I'm very proud of my 15.
I think that's great. That's 5 books a month on
Mhm.
average, and your goal 60?
Yes, it is.
That's exactly what you need to read every month, so it's perfect.
We'll see. We'll see, because life happens, and it might be a month where I read 1 book, and then, I might read
Yeah,
6 in another, but we're gonna make it to 60 this year.
I feel it. What was your if you had to pick one, what's your top book for the quarter so far?
I can't pick one.
I said you have to.
I can't pick one. It would have to be Harlem Rhapsody. I really, really liked Harlem Rhapsody, but I also really loved The Filling Station. So, I literally can't pick between the 2. They were both fantastic reads. I just ate them up, and I recommend them to everyone like I always do, of course, but Harlem Rhapsody and Filling Station, and they both were historical fiction books.
Surprise, surprise.
Right? Exactly.
Speaking of surprises, can you guess what my favorite book would be?
No, I have not the slightest idea. Brandon Sanderson, one of his millions of books that you have read.
Correct. I finished out the Mistborn trilogy, the first trilogy. So there's 2
Okay.
eras. There's era 1 and era 2. And I finished the 3rd book this month in that trilogy, The Hero of Ages, and just 5 stars all around. I posted it on Fable the other day. I was at Books A Million in Fairview, and somebody's looking at this book, and he keeps picking up a Brandon Sanderson book. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Do you like Sanderson?" He's like, "I'm kind of nervous. I don't know where to start." He picked up The Sunlit Man, and then he picked up
Mhm.
Mistborn, and he happened to think they were connected because the covers are kind.
Ah,
And I was like,
mhm.
"No, they're not connected. The universe is connected." I went into my whole spiel, and I said, "Grab Mistborn book 1, and you will be hooked." And so he went off. It was like talking to a kid. He ran off to his girlfriend and was like, "Yeah, that guy helped me find this book, and so I'm going to check it out." And so he went and bought that book. So, Brandon, if you're looking for somebody to peddle your books, hit me up.
That's actually funny because when I was in Barnes this past
Mhm.
Thursday, and they had a table, and I'm like, "Okay, something somewhere is telling me that I need to get into these Brandon Sanderson books," because, I mean, it wasn't just like a tiny table, just a little circle. No, this table was huge. It had all of his books on it. They were the hardback ones. They were also the paperback. And they even had like this huge poster. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it's going to happen. The only other table that was as big was the Sarah J. Maas table.
Okay, let's talk about it. That's like Taylor Swift and Beyonce. They're both huge, right? They both have
Uh huh.
incredible followings. One of them is actually really good, and the other one's really popular.
Well,
So
I like the way you put that.
I talk about that a lot. Maybe Sanderson isn't for everybody, but I
Hmm.
will say that he has the following that is diehard for a reason. For who clicks with his books, incredible. We are a little cult. We're a little culty. I'm not going to lie. We get a little fanatic, but it's a good time all around.
I feel like that's the same for the Sarah Mass world as well, or what's they call it, the Mass verse, because it's everywhere. So it's like you either have the Sandersons or you have the masses. I might as well just put it that way. It's
And then
everywhere.
somewhere in the middle, you got the Hooverites who are all insane.
Negative to the Hooverites. I'm not a Hooverite fan.
I am going to get to a couple of the books this year, so one way or another, I might make you read that one.
No, absolutely not.
We'll see.
So let's go to the next one. What was your biggest disappointment?
So I had a couple 2 stars and a couple, I think I actually had a 1 star. However, I didn't expect a whole lot from those books because I had never heard of them, but this
Mhm.
book I had been so excited about. I was waiting for it. I talked about it in one of our earlier episodes about it being one of my most anticipated, and that is At Dark I Become Loathsome by Eric LaRocca. While I gave it a 2.75, which isn't very low, I had very, very high hopes for this book, and it just didn't hit. It was
Mhm.
rather disappointing in the deliverance of the book. I think it was what I expected in some ways, and then I just really hoped to see him grow in some of his storytelling and get away from just like shock value. And I felt like we got a whole lot of shock value and not enough depth to the story.
I hate when that happens.
It happens. There were a lot of messages, and I think this is a theme with a lot of the books I'm reading this year. There's a lot of good message, good ideas, good things they're trying to put together, but they either don't commit to them, they don't follow through on them, or they use too many of them and none of them stick. And it committed, but in the middle, it let go, and then it brought everything back at the end, and it just got a little too crazy for me.
Well, that kind of falls right in line with my next biggest disappointment. Out of all of my whopping 15 books, I gotta say The Crash by Frida McFadden. I was just hoping for so much more from that story. And like I said, the 15 that I read were just really good. And that was the one that I actually rated the lowest out of all of them. It's not a bad book. It's just your typical Frida. You get your twist, and what you think is going to happen is not going to happen. So it was just that same type of structure that she keeps. So that one, yeah, no.
I still haven't read from Frida, but that one got quite a bit of hype, as it normally does on Book Talk and even Bookstagram. But I don't know. I've definitely seen much more love for some of the older books, and I think people are starting to get a little bored with the
Yeah.
predictability.
I will say for me, The Housemaid was my absolute favorite by her. I think now I'm at like 4 books by Frida, I think. I know it's somewhere under 5, but I'm still stuck with The Housemaid. That is the original number 1 Housemaid, not the second one. The Housemaid. That is my favorite by her.
At what point do you think could she be an author that you shy away from if you keep getting predictable books, or you think they're just comfortable enough right in the middle that you'll keep writing them and reading them as they come out?
I think I might keep reading them because they are very quick, fast-paced reads for me. So sometimes, you just, while you're working, you just want something to listen to for that day. You don't want music or you're working on a big project. So for me, I like to pick one thing that is brand new, that's gonna keep my attention, but also keep me focused on my project. So, Frida, I think, serves that purpose for me where I can usually read her books from start to finish in one day.
I have found that Darcy Coates is somebody like that for me who writes thrillers and
Mhm.
horror that is always middle of the road. Like I'm not blown away by anything, but they're always
Mhm.
just like good enough for me to keep picking them up. Yeah, some of them have been DNFs. I've put them down, but I'm still excited when a new book comes out for that author because I know what I'm getting. There's something to be said about
Right.
consistency.
And I feel like that's the same for I don't wanna speak for all thriller books, but I feel like usually when you get a thriller book, they're usually pretty fast paced. You grab it, you can listen to it day, day and a half, and you're like, "Okay, that was a good book," or, like, "Okay, let's move on to the next one," It's kinda like
Yeah.
that I need a break from the thicker reads because obviously I read, like the heavier, thicker books and stuff. But it's kind of like a good cleanser for me to squeeze a thriller in every once in a while.
Now, that one was more predictable. What surprised you this quarter?
Ooh, When the Moon Hatched. That one was my biggest surprise. At first, I was really nervous to read it because that would be my first. I don't know, do they call it like, it's not technically epic fantasy. I think it's still in that romantasy realm, but
That
it's
one is
very
considered romantasy still, but it definitely has
okay.
a high fantasy kind of vibe to it.
Okay, that was my very first high fantasy read where it completely just takes you to a different universe. Everything that you think about day and night is not even the same in that book. And when I first started it, the first time I picked it up, I was like, "Oh gosh, what am I reading?" I was like, "No," and I put it back down. And then, like most of us do, I went on Book Talk and I searched in When the Moon Hatched, and I stumbled across this young lady. I don't remember her tag, but when I tell you she broke this book down, I think we talked about it a couple episodes ago. She broke down this universe for me, and the way she did it made me more interested to pick the book up. And when I picked it back up, I'm reading and I'm like, "Okay, now this is making sense. I understand what these moons are and why you have this dragon and all these different places." And I absolutely cannot wait until the next book comes out. I can't wait to get back into this universe again. So that was my absolute biggest surprise.
Awesome. I'm going to get to it. I feel like I say
Mm.
this a lot. I will say this. I was super excited for the book. If I didn't have this podcast and I didn't have Emily reading it and you reading it, I probably would have already gotten to it
Mhm.
because somebody has read it. Somehow it's moved down on my priority list. And I don't
No,
know
you have
why
to move
that
it
is.
up. It's going the wrong way.
I know I'm going to really enjoy it, but lately it was hard to
Mhm.
get into it. I am a little put off by the language. It is high. I'm going to get to it, just like Watermoon. I'm going to get to it. I just
Mhm.
don't know when yet, but I'll get there.
For me, it was the ultimate, like, cozy read, I will say. Not in cozy a sense of, like, cozy mystery and, like, that kinda cozy, but really just to have a seat on the couch or put your headphones in, maybe have a cozy blanket and a hot beverage type of cozy. I was really able to escape into that book. I cannot wait to get back into it.
Well, second book is going to be coming out next year, so you won't have to wait too long.
I'm gonna reread the first one just because.
My biggest surprise was Murderbot. I read 4 books in 10 days. Obsessed. I have not touched book 5 yet. It is a full length novel. There are 7 total, so the next 3 books are full length. And I kept hearing about this series from Reagan, from Peru's project on BookTube. They talk about Murderbot a lot. They're these little novellas, and I'm like, I love novellas. Why don't I pick it up? When I tell you I picked that first book up, I put those headphones on, and instantly the action was nonstop, and then it ends. And I'm like, whoa! I was like, immediately the same day picked up book 2, and started listening to it. Picked up book 3 like 2 days later, and then I had like a couple day break, and then I finished book 4 because I just couldn't hold on to it anymore. So like that's just crazy to me. That was a huge surprise. So the last prompt that I have would be the most anticipated Q2 release. And I went through a lot of my books that I'm looking forward to in Q2, and I'm excited for the sequel, or I'm excited for, V.E. Schwab to give me a new book that's going to be vampires. Like, I'm excited for those books. But one on here that I think I'm the most excited about is from a new author for me and in the fantasy realm. Joe Abercrombie is the author, and he writes epic fantasy. It is grim, dark fantasy. This one is a blend between his traditional fantasy and a horror element, and it's called The Devils. I heard about it from, again, Peruse on BookTube, and she's excited about it because she has read all of his books, and this is so different from what he normally writes. She was excited, which made me excited about it because I feel like it's a good place to start with this author. It comes out in May, and I think of all of the books out of the next 3 months, and granted, Q2 is usually a slower time for book publishers. There just aren't a lot of books coming out until summertime, which would be Q3.
Mhm.
So the next few months might be slow in releases, but that one's the one I'm looking forward to the most.
So, I think my most anticipated release is Expected. I am really looking forward to book 3 in Kennedy Ryan Skyland series. I can't get enough. It comes out on May 13th, and I can't get my hands on this book soon enough. Like, I need it now. I will probably do the Audible or something to, like, pre-order it so I can listen. But if I get lucky enough, I am hoping so, that I'll be able to listen to it on Spotify because I know what I'll be doing on May 13th, reading Can't Get Enough some way, shape, or form, either on my Kindle, a physical, or through audio. It's gonna happen. I can't wait.
I think you've converted Emily over to probably the biggest fan of Kennedy Ryan. There are romance authors out there that have huge followings, but there's something from what I've heard from both of you, and I will be picking up at least one of the books in the series,
Mhm,
but there's something so raw and so real about the relationship dynamics and the content that Kennedy Ryan talks about in her books. Think of
mhm.
all of the romance authors out there, I feel like she earns her fandom because she writes real, authentic stories. And that is what I want to see. If I'm going to read a romance, I want to feel like
Yeah.
I can relate to it.
That's why I absolutely love Kennedy Ryan, because the first one, Before I Let Go, was about losing a child. So, the grief that comes with losing a child and having to read, going through the divorce, and it was just a really heavy book. The second one, she talks about how the son in the book has autism, so that was a huge thing that was in that book, and this 3rd one, I believe that if I remember correctly, the main character is actually taking care of her parent. One of her parents has Alzheimer's. I really like how she takes these real life scenarios and conditions that we all go through, and she just wraps it up in this beautiful love story, and I love it.
I support that wholeheartedly. And Emily keeps forcing me. She's like, "You got to read this, babe." And I'm like, "I know, I'll get there." If I did
Read it.
everybody telling me I need to read all these books, like it's my job, I'd like
I'm
it to
just
be,
saying,
but
hey, we speak these things into existence. It's gonna happen.
absolutely. So that was our quarter one recap, but we do want to give a more detailed recap for March. So in March, I'm projecting to read 15 books. I think I have 3 or 4 to go. So I'm around 11 right now, which is where I finished February. And I know I'll finish at least 3 of the 4 up here. One might end up as a DNF, but we'll chat about it. So
Mhm.
I did start off the month with a graphic novel. I do like to put my graphic novels in here still. They're reading. I enjoy reading graphic novels. This one it's a manga technically, and it's called The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. And it's one of these like cute little manga where there's this little girl being taken care of by this being. He's so sweet and doting on her. Something in the world has happened that's turning people into monsters. And so basically everybody in her village is gone. And he's trying to protect her and take care of her and like keep her and shield her from the truth of like what happened to everybody, and she's all alone now. Now there are people in this world, however, they think anybody over there that was in a village that was affected by this has to be infected. So they don't trust the little girl, and he's there to protect her. I only read the first book, but it's such a cute little cozy quick read. I can finish these things in 20 minutes, and the art is really cool. So I wanted to start off March with something light. Then I moved on to something I had talked about previously, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I was pleasantly surprised. I've been hearing a lot of things about this one that are mixed. I really liked it. I gave it a 4. It is not a straightforward horror. It is very much commentary on how people view girls, especially back in the 60s, where everybody was concerned with image. These fast girls, these wayward girls who were getting pregnant young and out of wedlock were sent away to homes to have the babies and then returned. And I think you read a book recently that talks about this in a drama context. What was that book? I feel like there was something where they sent away these girls to a home to deliver the baby.
Oh, that was House
Okay.
of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. I read that one last year.
This was in our women's episode last month. I
Mhm.
remember you bringing that up. Okay.
Yep.
So it's very much like that, but there is a witchcraft element to it and very much like communal with nature. Pretty standard fare for Grady Hendrix. It does get some body horror, but I want to stress that this body horror is just the fact that birth and pregnancy is terrible on a woman's body. Realistically, anybody who's like, this is so body horror, it's literally just what women go through every single day across the world in delivering children. Loved it, 4 stars. I'd still love Grady Hendrix. Hit or miss sometimes, but I really enjoyed that one. Then I moved on to another horror by somebody who normally is super gross in his horror, which is Nick Cutter. Very body horror, lots of grotesque things, and that's exactly what I got. The story was just really uninteresting. So I gave it a 2. I kind of expected that to be a 2 after starting it and like seeing where it was going. I pretty much knew that's where it was going to go. Nothing surprised me. It was entertaining enough. It was a quick read. I still recommend it for people who really love Nick Cutter because I think that's very much in his realm. And if you like his normal stuff, you're going to like that. But I think I'm a little over like the just over the top gore. It's just not for me. I had a couple surprises, I'll say. American Rapture. I've never read anything by CJ Lead. They wrote the book Mave Fly, which has a really cool looking cover, but there's a giant eye on the cover and is kind of grotesque. There's a lot of body horror. This one is a lot of body horror, but there's a lot of commentary on religion and the indoctrination of young people, young girls in the very strict Catholic sense of religion, how they're not taught about their bodies, about the secular world and different things like that. A lot of the horror here is just like, this is actually what we go through a lot. When you aren't conditioned to seeing it, you aren't as desensitized to it. There is actually quite a bit of like, it's a lust virus where people just start breaking out in aggressive sexual behavior. It was really interesting and a lot of commentary on like sex and the modern world, religion, just really a very unique read. I gave it a 4.5. It's pretty high up there because of the commentary about the church, I think was really what struck me. And like these young girls and different things like that. Really enjoyed that one. But it's not for everybody. I will say that.
It's a good thing nobody
Then
can see my face right now.
I know I keep seeing you make faces every time I say something about anything gross. We are definitely a very unique duo because you're all rainbows and sunshine and sadness when you want to read books about real life stories. And then I'm over here just like, this is as gross as it could possibly come. These are my favorite books.
No,
I know. I know.
I love this.
The next one was interesting because it was Our Winter Monster. And it was a story where the couple is going away to a winter retreat to rekindle a relationship. They crash the car. And then there's something in the snowstorm wreaking havoc. Wherever they go, it seems to follow them. And people are being killed, things are being destroyed. This small little winter mountain town is just being ravaged. It was a really interesting book because it talks a lot about the relationship and how they're going through kind of tumultuous times. And it kind of coincides with like this really tumultuous monster that's going through. So there's definitely some metaphor. There's some real reality to it. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 3.5. It surprised me a little bit. I'm only going to say this because you already know how I feel. The next book I read was The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. Just perfect. It really finished out the series well. And I'm very excited to have followed the characters. Very excited to have learned. I definitely had to brush up on some like high school chemistry and different metals because it is very, that's the magic system there, is ingesting metals. I watched a TikTok
Okay.
video and it was like all of the Brandon Sanderson like crazy ideas, and he's like, what if metal poisoning gave you special powers? And that's literally all it is. They ingest metals, heavy metals, and they get different magics from these heavy metals. It sounds crazy, but I mean, revolutionary. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait for you guys to read it next month, since somebody's flaking out on this March read.
Nobody's flaking out. Continue.
Emily's flaking out. She said, heck no. I only got a few more, and I'm going to fly through these last ones. I read The Knight and the Butcher Bird by Alex E. Harrow, which I don't think you've read anything by Alex E. Harrow.
Mm.
I've got quite a few that I think you'd like Starling House and 10,000 Doors of January. I think you'd really enjoy that one.
I wanted to read that book in January, but I never got around to it. I didn't realize that Alex Harrow is actually the same one who did write Starling House. That was on my to be read for a while. Just haven't picked it up. And then also The Thousand Doors of January. I wanted to read it last month.
I would say that I really like 10,000 Doors of January, very much like an Addie LaRue vibe to it.
Okay.
Um, it fantastical, magical realism, really good. Starling House has a bit of a romance aspect. And, I love inanimate objects with sentience. So the house
Mm-hmm.
itself is alive in a way. And there's a curse and there's a little bit of romance. I will say she probably could have gone a little lighter on calling these characters ugly. She's like, I don't know how anybody could love me. I'm so ugly. And I'm like, we get it. We don't need to beat the horse. I
Mm-hmm.
hated the way that she represented that, but the book is really good. I gave it 5 stars, and the cover is perfect. So I
Okay.
do think you'll enjoy either of those, but 10,000 Doors of January a little more.
Okay.
I read The Knight and the Butcher Bird. It's actually free on Kindle Unlimited's version of Audible, where you can get some audiobooks for free. It's short. It's really fantastical. Reminds me a lot of T. Kingfisher books. Very interesting. It was a little hard to follow because it's like you're thrown into it. I could listen to it in 20 minutes because I think the audiobook on one time speed was only an hour. It was a good time. 3.5, I think I gave it. Then I read Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. Let me tell you, this is one of the most masterful stories I've ever seen depict the problem with our modern internet crazed society. Those people who sit behind Fox News or even CNN, and they just get so brainwashed by the same biased opinion over and over. That's exactly what this book is about. While it does pick on some conservatism, you also see the other side of things, where the liberal side of things, where they're also brainwashed in a different way. They're desensitized to certain things. It is a crazy story from beginning to end. I loved it. To our listeners who resonate with the Caleb side of things rather than the Ashley side of things, Team Caleb is going to love this book. I gave it a 4 star.
Team Ashley.
Then I was super excited about this, and I kept telling you I was looking for it everywhere. The book was called Once Was Willem by M.R. Carey. It's a really cool looking book. I got it like the day that it came out,
Mm-hmm.
and it was hard to get into. It's very historical, medieval times, and
Oh.
you get a lot of history before you start getting some of the horror-ish elements to it. It's kind of horror, dark, gothic fantasy, medieval fantasy. It's got some Frankenstein vibes because he's brought back to life. So he once was Willem, but he's not Willem anymore. His name in the book is literally Once Was Willem. And there's this found family element. There's like ancient beings that created the earth that were like angels. It was so crazy and wild, but a really good story if you can get past the rather dry nature of this book. And also, I will say, do not pick it up on audio. The narrator's voices are terrible. When he has to do a female voice, it's like Mrs. Doubtfire bad. It's rough.
I hate when you get a book and the audio is just terrible.
No, it ruined it. But I was able to go through while writing the review and like really analyze what did I enjoy about this?
Okay.
And in doing so, I realized I actually really enjoyed this book for the content, and I can't fault it for having rather whack audible narration. Also, I think the only place I could find it on audio was Audible. Maybe that was
Okay.
just me. All right, a couple more, folks. Bear with me. I then read a book because the cover's really pretty called The Last Bookstore on Earth. And you know me, I love books about bookstores, libraries, books themselves, authors. Man, this book wasn't anything about a bookstore. It was about the end of the world and, a sapphic nature, a lesbian nature. I don't know. Don't,
I feel like
just
I
don't.
sent you this one. Is this the one that has like birds or fire or something on the front of
There's
it?
leaves or paper on the cover.
I seen
Yeah.
that on Facebook and I feel like I sent it to you because I was like, oh, a book about books. Caleb loves books about books. So let me send him this book.
Yep. I think if I had realized it was YA and a debut, maybe I wouldn't have been as excited about it.
Okay.
I'm not saying the book is terrible. I gave it 2 stars, but her writing's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Characters need work. And then this is one of the books that I think is very inconsistent. She starts some chapters off writing these people's stories as they come into the last bookstore on Earth. For the record, there's no context that actually if it's the last bookstore on Earth. She just can't get outside of her tiny little New Jersey neighborhood. So she thinks it
Mm-hmm.
is. She's telling their story. So a couple chapters start off with excerpts from these people's lives. And then for 40 to 60% of the book, you don't get a single one of those. And then in the last chapter, you get like another, here's an excerpt. Like that's what I was trying to do the whole time. It was
Mm-hmm.
really inconsistent. She also tried a couple other things and then stopped doing them and then brought them back at the end. Or she tried a couple things and just completely abandoned them. It needed some continuity editing that somebody who was editing this book should have said, I see what you're trying to do here, but we need a cohesive story. You need a stronger editor. I do think that I would read more from this author, being it was their debut, and I still enjoyed it fairly well. It was easy to read. I finished it in a day. I don't know. For some people, I think for YA, maybe they'll find something to love there. Wasn't for me. And then the last book that I've completed so far this month was The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. I absolutely love this story. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a Chronicles of Narnia inspired book
Mm-hmm.
with queer love sprinkled in, but not romance, but actually true love and
Mm-hmm.
friendship and a bunch of other things in a really cool, magical world. I know some people were like, yeah, but other people have done it better. But I really resonated with the writing, with the characters, with the fantastical world, with a little bit of context to stories and storytelling as like an art. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I am going to read more from Meg Schaefer. She has a book called The Wishing Game.
I
I've
read
heard
it.
really good things about that. Oh, you did
Mm-hmm.
read the. How did you
Yeah, I
like it?
did. I gave it a 3.
Okay. Was it
You're like, give me
magical? Was
more.
it
It wasn't bad. It was different, but it wasn't bad. I'll be interested to see what you think. I read it some time ago.
Have you read Narnia?
I have never read Narnia.
You've
I've watched the movies, but I've
okay.
never read it.
I love Narnia. I think
Mhm.
Narnia is one of the greatest classics in the fantasy realm. I don't
Okay.
want that high fantasy J.R.R. Tolkien. Know that there's a space for it, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about lighter fantasy. Narnia is where it's at. It's so magical and whimsical and wonderful. There's some dark elements to it, of course, but I would be interested to see you read Narnia and then see where the comparisons go to the Lost Story. If nothing else, I
Okay.
think Narnia is definitely one that you should check out. They're short, they're really easy to read. Um, so just an idea.
So which one is that?
You would want to read,
Um,
I would read The Magician's Nephew and then The Chronicles of Narnia. They're both really short, but it
okay.
really truly shows how Narnia was made and created and the magical wells that kind of exist in this dimension.
Mhm.
For I love portal fantasy. So you really get to understand, like, oh, they stumbled upon this world of true darkness. Just there's nothing
Okay.
in it. And then you hear a roar, and then you see light, and then you see everything created in the world right in front of your eyes. That is The Magician's Nephew. You got to check it out.
I'm gonna have to check that one out. It says on here that it's book number 6, so it sounds like that was like a prequel, how
He
the books are
wrote
written.
yes, he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, and I think the first 3 books, and then wrote The Horse and His Boy, and then The Magician's Nephew, and then finished out the series with book 7. I think some people criticize it because they're anti-religion in different ways, but I think there's something to be said about fantasy and religion in that context that I really enjoyed. I read it as a kid.
I'll give this one a try. I'll put it on for Q2.
Sweet. The last 4 books I'm currently reading, I have an arc that comes out in 6 days that I need to finish, A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. I will finish that because I need to finish it before publication day. Having an okay time. I'm not blown away by it. It's a sequel to the first book called The Tainted Cup. It's got Sherlock Holmes vibes in a really unique world, but I am a little bored with some of the characters right now, and the story's just taking its good old time, and I needed to pick up. So we'll see how that goes. I will update everybody likely on BookTube, or obviously you can check me out on the next episode of the podcast. I got two vampire stories, which is Lightfall by Ed Crocker. It's a fantastical vampire world where there's vampires and werewolves and sorcerers, but there are no humans. It's a really interesting, twist on the modern vampire tale. So I'm excited about it. I am in a little bit of a lull with it, but we'll see. And then Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. If you know Stephen Graham Jones, you know that his books can be very methodical. They take their time. You might not understand what's going on, but they come together at the end. So I'm hoping this one comes together at the end. It's a historical, vampire, native inspired. There's always something to do with native culture, as Stephen Graham Jones is native himself. I love his books. I always have a good time, but I am struggling a little bit with this one. But it might be in my head, not necessarily a fault of the book. And then I got a little cozy book, The Teller of Small Fortunes, that I'm hoping to palate cleanse before all the chaos that April is going to bring us, the chaos and the fun. But I think I'm going to finish out the month with that. So if I finish all 4 of those books, I will be at 15 books for the month.
The Teller of Small Fortunes is actually one that I had on my list to read because I really liked the cover of it. I think it was a book of the month book. I gotta figure out where I saw this one because I remember seeing The Teller of Small Fortunes somewhere, and I was like, "Ooh, I love how book of the month works."
They have the normal tier, regional tier, and then Caleb gets his own books. And they're none of the books that anybody else gets, and I want the other books. But I have lucked out these last couple months. I got some good ones, so I just haven't read them yet.
I'm actually really excited for the book of the month ones that we have. We'll have to do like maybe little segments or something on the books that we get from there because it's the first time I actually got 3 books from book of the month this time. Normally, I just get like the one or maybe I'll get 2, but this time I was like, nope,
Yeah.
I want 3. I
Yeah.
ordered it well within the first week, but it just took forever to be delivered. Thankfully, I had the other 2 books on audio and on my Kindle from the library, so I didn't miss out on our book club reads, and I'm like, "Man, this is taking a while."
I haven't started the book club read. You know me.
You have to. Oh my
I
gosh, I
will
can't
finish
wait to
it
talk about that.
likely at the beginning of April because that's why it's not in my books for the end of the month.
Uh-huh.
We're probably not going to do that till the first weekend of April for our discussion. So I'll probably read
Mhm.
it the day before, like I normally do.
I will say this one was a fairly quick read for me. I think I finished this one in 3.5 or 4 days, which is, I average usually sometimes books for me is like a week because I usually only read in the evenings, but that one, I just listened and read. I couldn't put that one down.
Yeah. I'm
Mhm.
excited.
So I love that your list is the total of what I read for the whole year. Now I'm going to share the books that I actually read. So my wrap up for March. I will start with The Nightingale. I know I recently touched on it last episode, but I did finish The Nightingale. I thought the book was very good. I hear so many people talk about The Nightingale and they're just instantly, this book brought me to tears. Well, I still think I might be broken because these books are not bringing me to tears, like they say. But I will say The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna was a very good read. I did enjoy it. It was a historical fiction, which I found that I did actually read a lot for March. I gave that one a 5. I also previously mentioned The Filling Station by Vanessa Miller. This one was actually about the Tulsa Massacre and how just these families built these homes and they were so established in Greenwood. And then all of a sudden, these kids are supposed to graduate and then they don't get to graduate. They go to the practice, they send everybody home. And then this is when the riots actually start. And just going through their I don't wanna call it a journey because it's really not a journey. It's like their life story and how they managed to rebuild. So how some of their families are living in tents. They become very sick from whatever illness just goes through, and how some of these individuals are kept in these camps off to the side. Just really poor conditions, and the way they were able to rebuild in that area. Exceptional. I loved it. Historical fiction as well, 5 stars. That book was actually just released on March 11th. I did have the advanced reader copy of that, so I was able to finish it that evening, which was just even more of an overwhelming feeling because I actually accomplished it. I was like, yes, I did it. The next one I read was, I keep wanting to say The Water Moon, but it is not The Water Moon. It is Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yamboy. Did I say that right? I
Yambao.
think I did. Thank you. I gave this one a 3.5. I would call this one a mix of your cozy mystery and magical realism. This one was very interesting, actually, because it's about this pawn shop. It's a secret pawn shop that only shows as a pawn shop for the people that need it. And it's where you can sell your regrets. This character acquires this pawn shop as her own, and her father suddenly disappears. They have this big celebration with sake and all these things, and they go to bed. The pawn shop is hers the next day, and her father is gone. So there's all these different little hints of things that he actually left for her, and they travel to this different world that they have. And just the way the book was written, I did have to take a little bit of a break because I was like, where is this thing going? But I really did enjoy it once I was able to sit down and finish it. I like the way that it came together. The only reason why I gave it a 3.5 is just it didn't keep me interested the whole entire time. It was where I noticed I couldn't listen to it. I needed to actually read the book because just listening to it, I was like, well, wait, they were just in some restaurant and now they're in some world where people are folding paper. I just couldn't do it that way. I had to actually physically read this book, so it took a little bit longer. I read another thriller. So this one was Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier, and I gave this one a 3. I feel like all of the thrillers that I read for some reason just happen to trend at a 3. They are not the absolute phenomenal, oh my gosh, have to read it 5, but they are a good story. I'm finding that throwing in a couple thrillers in my month is actually helping from going from the historical fiction and going from, the literary fiction and things that I'm finding myself gravitating more towards. Having that break really just helps, keep me interested in reading. My next one is actually a advanced reader copy that I was approved through for NetGalley. So this is my projected read. And I'm saying projected because I'm pretty sure I'll be finished with this one in like probably 2 or 3 days. But I am really excited for it because even though I've mentioned all these books, I haven't had my love story yet. Because, I love my love stories. So this one is called No Ordinary Love. It's a true romance book by Maya Ariel. And this book comes out on April 1st. So I'm just really excited because it's that wholesome love story that I feel like I have to have at least one a month. I don't know. You just got to have them, right?
Exactly. Yep, absolutely.
You just have to. Just good, solid love stories you got to have. And my last book that I read, The Lion Women of Tehran, was actually our book club read. So, Who Needs Reads? It was our book club read for March because we wanted to highlight a book about strong women. And this book exceeded all expectations. I was able to read this book in 4 days. I just could not put it down. Every second that I had available, I was reading this book. I wanted to physically read this book and tab it because it had a lot of really good quotes. The culture woven into this story is what took me by surprise. Normally, you just read a book and you're reading about these characters. But I mean, it felt like I was in the kitchen with them at some points within this story, with how she was describing the different meals and stuff that they would cook, or how they would have like these different drinks that were their traditional dishes and things. It was really something that was very interesting to me. And I mean, technically, I'm not supposed to give my rating on it. So we have to have a book chat on it. But I will say I was really surprised by The Lion Women of Tehran. And if anybody knows me, they'll probably already know what I'm going to say for it. But very exceptional read. And I think it just means that I need to add what our next book club will need to read because we're already talking about it. So, Caleb, do you want to share what we're going to be reading for April?
Yeah, so this one we're going to do a little bit different than we have in the past. We normally put up a poll for our book club members to decide what we're going to read next. However, we are so excited about this one. I think the hype
Hmm.
is real. It is a book of the month, book of the year, Lolly
Hmm.
winner, which is The God of the Woods.
Yes.
The reason we picked it, it has those spring vibes to the cover. It's got a good mystery element to it. It's going to be very immersive. We were just so convinced that everybody in the book club is hopefully going to love this. We decided to
I
go ahead and
hope
pick that
so.
one.
I hope
So
so.
I'm excited. I'm very, very excited about it. We'll be kicking that one off for April, and I think it fits so well with all of the things we have planned for April. The vibes, the tone of the month, the tone of our reading that we're hopefully going to have. So I'm excited.
I am equally excited because this is the first time. Well, I won't say it's the very first time because when we first started the book club, I was like, hey, we're reading this one. We're going to read this one. And then I was like, hey, this thing has a poll. We started experimenting with the poll, and that really forced us to read outside of our comfort zones. And I really like that. But now with God of the Woods being released and being the Lolly of 2024, it's even more like I have to read this book. And I just feel like why not read it with our book club, being that we already have these awesome discussions? I think it's going to just take the book club to another space.
I agree. Maybe this will be a book that Emily actually engages in because I don't think she's reading this month, which is okay. The books aren't always going to resonate with every reader. It's okay to take a month off of that book club pick that you're just not feeling. Okay, don't feel bad. If you're a Shara, you owe us one though. You gotta read God of the Woods, okay? I'm saying that on the podcast. It's going on. It's going on Fable. I am calling you out, Ree. You gotta read this one.
I could just see her face now. Oh my gosh. I love it.
This will be a test if she actually listens to the podcast. I'm calling her out.
Right. I'll make sure that I won't give her any like, "Hey, listen to the podcast."
That'll be fun. I'm excited. There's good momentum building in that group. We're getting more and more engagement every month. I think we're
Mhm.
reading really not I don't want to say fun. We're reading impactful reads that surprise and astonish some of us. I
Mhm.
definitely wasn't sure we were gonna pick a thriller that everybody liked, and then we picked a thriller that even Emily, who never reads thrillers, enjoyed. We've done a really good job with the club.
I can't wait to see more people enjoy and read these different books with us. I always wanna make sure that what we're reading is not something that you can just find all over Book Talk. That is one goal I have set out for us. Like, we might get an occasional, "This book is all over BookTube," but no, I'm trying to find different things that just set it apart, you know?
Absolutely. We talked about March. Now we're going into something fresh, something new. Spring is here. Okay. April is here. It is kicking off Q2, and we're going to start with a fresh start. And that means our inaugural Read-A-Thon. We talked about in the last episode about wanting to do a Read-A-Thon in April, and we are going to do this April 20th to April 27th, so 8 days.
Mhm.
It's the spring cleaning Read-A-Thon, and we are aiming to attack that pile of TBR building up next to the bed, on the bookshelves, and tucked in the closet, and everywhere else you have those books. We want to try and get some of those off the list. Let's try and get some of those off the shelf. Read it and haul it, whatever you need to do. But we want to focus on books that we already spent our hard earned money on. That includes our Kindle reads,
I was just gonna say you
because I
gotta
know
include
somebody's
it.
a notorious Kindle buyer. She's got more books on her Kindle than you can probably imagine.
I have more books on my Kindle than I actually have on my shelf.
And that's okay.
That bad.
That's okay. It's more versatile and economical.
Yes, absolutely.
But we want to focus on that. We're going to do some reading sprints throughout the week. We have this really cool idea, and I'll let you talk about it, for some prompts, some bingo board prompts to kind of inspire as to what to pick off the shelf, because it can be daunting. Like, where do I start?
So some of my favorite prompts that we have created for our spring cleaning readathon will be, of course, a book that's been on your TBR forever. We all have those books that are just sitting on the shelf collecting dust, and we keep saying we're going to get to it. I know I already have a couple books that fit that prompt. Another book would be a book with a fresh start. This one is a story about new beginnings, reinvention, or second chances. We all know I am a fan of second chance romances. Another prompt that I thought would be good to spotlight would be a book you've been avoiding. Clearly, I have been avoiding a book and I finally have a place to. So we have been saying we are going to read, well, I have been saying I am going to read Mistborn probably literally every episode. So now, being the 8th episode, I have said this 8 times. But finally, I will be able to start this nice and early. It is going to be Mistborn. I'm telling you, that's the one that's going to fit that prompt for me. And another favorite one that I really just I think it's actually kind of my favorite is The Last In, First Out. Read your newest book on your shelf. I recently treated myself to some new books for my birthday, so I am really excited that I can actually tackle some with this one. And I don't know which one it'll be. I just bought 6 new books.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a week, and, I read fairly quickly. Everybody's going to have a pace. You finish one book, you finish one book. You finish no books, but you read the whole time, whatever the case may be. We just want to say, hey, let's switch our focus from getting those new releases off the barn shelf, or going out there and getting our favorite book from the library, which we love the library.
Mhm.
But we also, we're collectors, and we have some books here. And I know for a fact, I haven't read a book that I have bought on my shelf in months. Okay. I buy them, they sit for a minimum of 6 months, and then I maybe eventually get around to them. I've got books on the shelf for the last 5 years. So I definitely want to get to a few of those. I don't know how many I'm going to get to. Depends on what I pick, but the prompts are going to be real fun to say, this has a pastel cover
Mhm.
or this fits the prompt or whatever the case may be. I'm excited for that. And Emily's really excited. She helped me come up with some of these prompts last night. Very excited. April 20th through April 27th. We're going to get some stuff going out on our socials so you can see the bingo board and a couple other things like that. Look for those soon
Mhm.
and more details to come from that.
And I still keep telling Caleb that we need to have a spring cleaning month because I read slower, but he says for me to still do it for a week. So we'll see how many books I get to tackle. I know it's not going to be Mistborn.
Yes.
Mistborn's going to be a whole month.
Maybe you finish in that week. Who knows?
Well, we'll see.
So, yeah, I'm really excited for that. And another thing that I'm really excited about is to talk about what we have been alluding to for a lot of this episode, which is our quarterly buddy reads, our buddy challenge to each other. We talked about it quite a bit. I know I mentioned Untethered
Mhm.
was your challenge to me in February, and we've already briefly talked about it. I really enjoyed it. And I'm like, wow, this was a really cool challenge.
Mhm.
And I'm so excited for Ashley to read my book. Ashley, why don't you let him know how that went? Were you as excited to read my book as I was yours?
No.
She can't stop laughing long enough to talk, folks.
Oh, when I say Ninth House was a challenge for me. I won't say it was a terrible book, but man, this was truly a challenge. Not only did it take me out of my comfort zone, it was a book that I just could not finish. But I did. I finished it exactly like 2 hours before we started recording today. So I did finish it. But I will say that the reason why it was so much of a challenge for me is because, yes, I do read dark academia. Yes, I do read books that deal with secret societies and things of that nature, but this was a completely different spin as to what I have recently read. So the books that I normally read have that love story. They also have the action that goes along with it. And they're fairly easy reads. They're easy to keep up with. You know what's going on. Ninth House for me, I felt like I was just on the struggle bus. You know, the meme where the kid is being dragged around the merry-go-round? That was me the whole time. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I still have 4 hours left." And it was just so daunting for me to finish. But being that this book was very different, I will not say it was terrible. Will I read it again? No. Will I read book 2? No. I gave this book
Wow.
a 3.5. That is a very good rating for me. I feel like because initially I had to think about it because I was gonna give it a 2. And I was like, "No, this has some substance to it." So I gave it a 3.5. And me giving it a 3.5 actually stemmed from me going down the rabbit hole. I actually discovered that these secret societies with Yale actually do exist. That was just more interesting to me because I'm like, "Wait, what? They really do exist?" So, of course, I did go down the rabbit hole before talking on this. Very interesting. And I feel like this is something that I will research more just because it's interesting to me, being that it's actually real.
There are movies. I think the movie is Skull and Bone.
Mhm.
It's a Hollywood movie, and it is based on the secret societies of Yale, one of them being Skull and Bone.
Yeah.
If I had just thought about it for a minute, I could have said this had a historical fiction, and maybe you would have given it some love.
No.
Instead, I'm telling y'all, listen to me. We were fighting the whole week. Every time she texts me about that book, I was heated. I'm like, it's too slow. You just read When the Moon Hatched, which is so slow, or
Mhm.
Untethered, which definitely did not have, it's not plot driven.
Mhm.
But I will say, I also said the book is slow.
Yes.
We had a good time with this challenge. I think a 3.5 is great. I gave it a 4.
Mhm.
So we're not that far off. I wouldn't call this a fail, but I do worry about what you are going to try and challenge me with next
Oh,
quarter.
this is payback. Payback. I'm going to dig up something that is really gonna just take you out of your comfort zone completely. I don't know what it is gonna be yet, but I'm going to find something. I will say this wasn't terrible. Like I said, it wasn't terrible, but it was definitely a difficult read. That's for sure.
We're going to go more in depth with this. Everybody, look in the link of this episode for a link to our book chat over on YouTube, which is going live the same time. We're going to dive into Untethered and Ninth House
Mhm.
together. We're just going to talk about why did we challenge each other, because the whole purpose of this challenge isn't to be mean, even though she thinks it was. Um,
Totally mean.
it was to challenge to get everybody out of their comfort zones because we become complacent in our comfort zones. And realistically, what did your parents always tell you? You got to try it before you say you don't like it.
Mhm.
And this is one of those where somebody else is forcing us to get out of that bit of complacency and try something new. So we're going to dive into it together and we're just going to have a good time. It's going to be really chill, laid back episode. So don't expect anything polished. We're probably going to be goofy and laughing the whole time, but
The whole
come hang
time.
out with us and see what we thought.
It's always a vibe. I can say that it's always a vibe when we get together and talk about books. Whether it's podcasts, sprints, or just random book chats, it's definitely always a good time.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've hyped you all up for our YouTube buddy challenge fight that's going to happen over there, we're going to say thank you all for listening to episode 8. We're really enjoying this. We're having such a good time. And we hope that you all join us over on Fable for Who Needs Reads in April's God of the Woods book pick. Go check us out on YouTube and watch us fight for an hour about Ninth House.
It's just like a sibling rivalry, you know? Payback is coming.
Fair. That's fair. Oh, Lord. All right, everybody. Until next time.
Happy reading.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye.